Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Node Chat. On this episode, we're going to do a deep dive into cyber essentials. Is it worth it? What is it? And I'm delighted to have Richard with me today, who's an expert in this field from SupPortal. Richard, thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome, Neil. Yeah, so I've been doing cyber essentials now for about 4 years. My company is basically a cybersecurity consultancy. We help businesses to overcome their, worries or fears with, cyber problems that, it could be that they've had a ransomware attack, or they've got a requirement for cyber essentials because of a government tender, for example. So we go in there and we help them get through cyber essentials, and we just and if there's anything else to come out of it, we try and help them along the way, just to improve their overall security posture for the business.
And I wanted to take the time of your day to do a real deep dive into cyber essentials. So I really wanted to understand how long has it been around. From my understanding, it's very government led. So it tends to be businesses look into it when they've tried to engage with a government body and it's a contract requirement. Am I right in thinking so firstly, when did it first come into action? When was the Essentials program launched?
So it started in June 2014, and you're right, it was a government backed scheme. The government, along with IASME Consortium and the Information Security Forum, they got together and they wanted to put together a set of technical controls that would work for every business, really. But the feeling was that business really wasn't doing enough to protect itself, basically.
Yeah.
And they thought, we need to come up with something that's going to work for all businesses, big or small, that will put in a set of technical controls that will actually, mean something. And the upshot of it is that the technical controls they put in place, basically 80% of the attacks that come into businesses, these controls mitigate pretty much all of those by having them in place. So that was the reason for it. And then after the scheme was launched, later on in 2014, the government said, okay, if you're tendering for government work, you're going to have cyber essentials at the very least,
yes,
or the audited version, which is cyber essentials plus. And that's how it's been, spread out from that, basically. So you see big companies, your aerospaces and your BAE systems, all those ones started out with it. Their supply contracts and tenders would say, if you want to do business, you need cyber essentials. So that's how it's gone. And then, the idea is, if you're signed up to cyber essentials, your supply chain should also be signed up to cyber essentials.
I see.
Yeah.
So
that's how they wanted to filter it down to make it work. But, it's a government-backed thing. So these things don't always work.
No, and that did allude to me. So in our world, which is digital, which is risk assessment, really, was before we undertake at the underwriting stage, we want to holistically be able to take a snapshot of that business and assess to our best ability whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And I go back and forth with Cyber Essentials, because Cyber Essentials Plus I haven't had too much experience with. But I think Cyber Essentials, for me, within the UK, never really got momentum outside of government requirement contracts in the way that perhaps it was meant to. And I know, and then that kind of alludes me to how it fits alongside the other standards. So I can remember the British standards around the 27001, 9001 around data control processes. And just really, I don't know, like, do you think it's worked? Do you think enough businesses are aware of it and use it? Because it fundamentally, it is very high level, very simple, good practices as far as I'm aware, from not the plus necessarily, but the actual basic essentials So it's not very. I don't think it doesn't seem very hard for businesses to get through. And we'd certainly think that if they do have the fundamentals or the essentials, then we would definitely see that as a plus. But we don't see it that as often as I would have expected.
Well, there's a lot of common sense to it, and if you read through what it is, you think, well, yeah, that sounds very easy, which it is. But you'd be surprised how many companies just take it for granted that they're going to be okay, or it's not going to happen to us, or all that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, 27001 is, the thing to have if you want some kind of information assurance or risk or risk-based information management
But
system.
that's a lot bigger than essentials.
That is, that's for big organizations. However, you could go into a big firm that's got ISO 27001 and they could still fail Cyber Essentials, because what Cyber Essentials does, it puts in actual technical controls, whereas 27001 is all risk-based. So if the company says, I'm happy to leave all these ports open on my firewall, it's a risk I'm prepared to take. But if you were going for Cyber Essentials, it would say you need a business case to have these ports open and a proper justification for it. So, and you could fail if you had things open, or it could be, here's one that happens quite often actually. So you have a 27001 company, and because they're quite a large organization, doing their patch management within the Cyber Essentials scheme, you have to get your security patches done within 14 days. Well, they may not think it's possible, and they want to take a risk and say, well, we'll do it once a month, or we'll do it once a quarter. Okay, so that would be a fail. They wouldn't get Cyber Essentials. And like what happened with the NHS and the WannaCry, it was too expensive for them to roll it out. They felt, to do all the patch management, and then look at the mess they got themselves into when that happened. If that, the patches have been available for a good 6 to 8 weeks before that happened, and it could have been done, but they just didn't have the time, resource, or money to implement it.
It's a really good point. I mean, we certainly see when we're trying to look at red flags, and that's all we can do as underwriting agency, to look at very holistic information. So we look at backup frequencies, we look at documentation which they hold on file, recovery plans, etc. But we're looking more at patch frequency and their ability to patch in a time framework, such as just for the exact same example as what happened with the NHS. And you're right, the larger the organization, the more layers, the more technology layers are. I mean, you have to empathize a little bit with the NHS because of what they do, how they do it. I mean, they just the ability to patch all their systems, all their network, all their frameworks. I mean, it's to get that to be done.
It's a big ask.
For 14 days. But then perhaps that's because patching is never at the forefront.
I mean, if it's always up to date and always done, then it's not such a bad thing. But we all know that if you're a user of Microsoft, if you roll a patch out, you may catch a cold, when you do it. So there's.
I like the way you say. I like the way you say you may.
Yeah,
you most likely.
So in larger organisations, they tend to roll it out, and want to test it first before they, the masses have it. And obviously, all that takes time. They want to, all the different systems they have, etc. But
do you see in 2020 that Cyber Essentials is larger and has got momentum and is growing, or do you still see it as a fairly stagnant kind of adoption, mainly led through government engagement and then it being a contract requirement?
Well, it's an interesting time in the evolution of Cyber Essentials, actually, because when it came about, originally there were just the two accreditation bodies, which were IASME and CREST.
Yes.
And then it grew to about 5 accreditation bodies. And then back last year, early 2019, late 2018, the NCSE, who run the scheme for the government, they were like, well, it's really good that we've got these accreditation bodies and all these certification bodies that do this for us. However, the different accreditation bodies, although they're all meeting the same controls, the 5 controls, each one's doing it in a slightly different way, and they felt that was being a bit confusing to the consumer of it. So they decided to put out a tender for just one. And in October last year, IASME were announced as the preferred partner for the scheme. And then April this year is when they took on the mantle of NCSE sole Cyber Essentials partner. So, and obviously that's right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, terrible time.
So, they had big plans, big launch, all the rest of it, but, it went off like a damp squib, unfortunately.
Of course.
So, yes, I was expecting earlier in the year big things for 2020 for Cyber Essentials.
Weren't we all on many other levels, weren't we? But,
but
yeah.
we arrived at a new normal, didn't we? So,
yeah.
So that didn't really happen. But I do, honestly, I do think it is going to go places. I think it is going to become more of a thing for business to have.
Good.
Because it is a really good set of controls, and it's dealt in from top down. So the board member has to sign it off. They need to be aware of what's going on and get a little bit of understanding of what it means and how to protect their businesses. I mean, everybody's aware of hackers and all this. Everybody must have had an email from somebody saying, "Oh, I've got your password from this."
Prince in Nigeria.
So it's a good scheme. I think going forward, what's going to happen, and it has been talked about, is that the whole supply chain thing. If I've got it, then you must have it, etc.
Yeah.
I think it will work, but I think they're going to put something in place whereby you'll be able to log in to a portal maybe, and I don't know, put your suppliers in there, and it'll have a RAG status of whether or not they've got Cyber Essentials. It might be so green's got it, amber's getting it, red doesn't have it, and then it'll give you a bigger picture of your risk within your supply chain, if you like.
Supply chain risk for us is huge.
Yeah.
So we provide as underwriting, as insurers, that we provide a thing called contingent business interruption, and effectively what that means is that if something happens to one of your supply chains, if one of your third-party supply chains suffers a cyber event that impacts your business negatively, then there would be coverage and there would be business interruption cost as a result of that. And supply chain, because of the software as a service, I think because of the way the internet shifted from having large amounts of data held on site or somewhere within the premises, everybody's moved it to a third party. So infrastructure has really embraced the cloud, software as a service, third parties doing certain things for businesses, whether it's payment, data storage, client controls, document management, whatever it might be. That has definitely meant that our systemic risk model has changed, and our systemic underwriting has changed. So we would love the ability to be able to, in the way that you described, to have confirmation from an insured that their vendors for business critical activities hold Cyber Essentials as their supply chain, and or that they make it a mandatory requirement. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good. I don't think the government's brave enough to say it's a thing you must have yet. I think they're kind of hoping it will sort itself out, like they tend to do.
Yeah.
But alongside that, there is another scheme which IASME do, which is their IASME governance, which is a small business version of ISO 27001, and that is some governments, and it includes the Cyber Essentials controls as well.
Is it fair to say, just pause for a second, IASME is broader than Cyber Essentials? I'm not fully aware of the difference between the two, or if they all merged now and we now call it IASME.
Yeah, so IASME, Information Assurance for Small Medium-Sized Enterprises, that's what it stands for.
Okay.
They are in the original team, to put the technical controls in place, but they have their own governance standard. Okay, so you can have Cyber Essentials, and you can have IASME Gold, and you can have IASME, or Bronze, Silver, etc. But IASME Gold is like an audited version. very similar to 27001, and there are many crossovers. It covers pretty much 90% of the same things that 27001 does, but it doesn't have a great big stack of paperwork behind it. But it gets your brain thinking about those things. So the bits that Cyber Essentials don't cover, the risk management and stuff, they're in the IASME governance.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's something that businesses can look at, because they're not expensive. I mean, Cyber Essentials, to get certified for Cyber Essentials is £300. If you weren't going to self-certify, it's nothing. And if you wanted to do the IASME governance, it's £400.
Yeah, it's nothing.
It's nothing.
No.
It's very that's the idea of it. They want more people to do it because it's better for everybody at the end of the day. If you can take a little bit of time to think about what you're doing with your data, or how you're working from home.
I think a lot of it, as well as business owners, is people that aren't from your field or our sort of field, they just don't know. And I think to follow a framework, such little cost, makes so much sense. So the podcast was themed, is Cyber Essentials worth it or not? And I'm definitely leaning, as I'm speaking with you now. Initially, I was thinking, well, it's not really got momentum and it's feeling somewhat stagnant, and not many people have adopted it. But definitely with what you've said that's going to happen later on in the year, and would have been very different with the way that the body's moving, sounds very exciting. And I definitely do. I think when you think about that cost level for that would help a business owner that has no experience of managing data, how should it be managed, safety controls, good practices, best practices, it sounds a bargain, really.
Yeah, I mean, so the University of Leicester did a paper on Cyber Essentials to see, is it worth it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it overall was, yes, it really is. It does actually make a difference. It does stop 80% of the cyber threats that affect most businesses. They've looked at all the attacks that generally come in, and 80% of those get stopped by just having those controls in place.
That's such a compelling statistic.
And the interesting thing was when they did it, the most important one of those controls was the least accepted as something that was useful, and that's patch management. Businesses just didn't really consider it as a thing. Top of their list was, strong passwords.
I was going to say obvious ones.
All that sort of stuff. So your secure configuration bit, that's what they were talking about. Yeah, we need that. And obviously not letting people have access, and malware, anti-malware. But anti-malware is rubbish these days. You have it as a last defense. If you haven't done everything else, that's the last bastion that's going to protect you from something that you've just let in the door. But it may or may not help you. These ransomware attacks or whatever, they run in memory now, and they're very sophisticated.
I was going to say that I think probably a better way of phrasing that is that antivirus used to be more effective because it was so easy to detect. There was malware was really just kicking your door down or kicking off the hinges, and it was very clear that someone was in.
Downloading a proper binary file or whatever, but now they'll just inject a bit of PowerShell.
Yeah,
you won't even know it's happened. There'll be maybe a quick flick on your screen or something, and then before you know it, it's now saying, "We've got your computer ransom."
Yeah, and that's the sophistication that we've seen over the last sort of probably 10 years or 5 years at least, where the malware was very disruptive and very quick to let you know that something happened. Now, sophistication and organized crime have gone the reverse. Their aim is to not be detected, is to not be seen.
I mean, for sure.
So you'll get botnetting away.
I'll go on an engagement whereby, some companies had an attack and they want some kind of audit taken, see if they can find it. And you'll find out invariably that whoever's done it's been in their system for at least 3 months.
Yeah.
Just waiting, picking off stuff, just having a look around, filtering information off, find out who's where, just gradually trying to build up a profile of the company they're at and who to attack.
We did a great interview with a close friend of the company, and they provide stress testing. They're based in America, so for some of our US insureds, and they refer to it as the soft underbelly. And I really like that phrase, because what we're finding in a lot of our claim scenarios, just to your point, that the perpetrator has been in there a couple of months, maybe more, and they're purely sat there seeing when's the best time and the most or the worst time for the insured to strike with some sort of ransomware event, or if their aim is to manipulate or create social engineering scenarios, they will sit there and look normally within the email transactions on who the accounts, when is money leaving the business, and how they can manipulate that invoice to create fraudulent wire transfers. But you're right, and so much so that we and most of our counterparts in the cyber insurance world, we've moved away from retro dates, meaning that coverage has a fixed start date and coverage wouldn't be in place had you not bought the policy. So, for example, if you bought a policy today, but you were to, or we had insured that bought a policy today, we deployed you to, in the event that they had a circumstance, and you would reported back to us that the circumstance started on the 1st of January, then technically that was before the policy incepted, and therefore coverage wouldn't be given. So what we've done, and I think it's fair to say the industry as a whole, is we now move, just because of this incident and this scenario, we do a thing that's called full prior acts, which means that it's kind of when the claim happened, it's irrelevant when they got in the system, because we're seeing it just as you described, time and time again, that people want to sit there quietly, and that's why patching, and it's so interesting, because the great thing about Cyber Essentials then is that by giving somebody information they would never have thought of, patching very rarely makes the headlines in communication of why the end occurrence, hacked, breached, ransomware, data loss, social engineering, cybercrime, fraud, they're all terminologies that get spoken about in a great deal. And I think most insureds that we deal with, and probably a lot of people you sadly come into contact with, because it sounds like a lot of your clients have already suffered a peril or an event, they don't think they're going to get hacked, breached, ransomware. But when they understand patching and how people identify networks that haven't been patched, really like a Google search looking for people that are running non-patched applications, by default they become the target.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that, patching, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get it up to date. I mean, it really is, whether you find it difficult or not, it's so important, because that is how your attacker is going to get in. You think you've got, your anti-malware on there, that's not going to stop them getting in there. It's far more sophisticated than that.
And I had a question for you, which was, what are the benefits from the process? And I think that really sums it up, is the fact that it does bring to the forefront of cyber essential people that are using the program or following the steps, that it does raise awareness to things that they definitely wouldn't be thinking about could have such a catastrophic result should they not have it in place, such as patching. And that study, I'd love to be able to get a copy, if you have a copy, and we can circulate it to our listeners, or about the Leicester paper that you mentioned, because that's a staggering statistic. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that I always like to think about when we have a guest on is, where do you see it going? And it's kind of that looking the 50, I think they call it 50,000 feet above view downwards, or looking at maybe the 5-year moving forward. Like where would you see Cyber Essentials in 5 years' time or less?
Well, we've already touched on this, but I think there's definitely going to be more emphasis on the supply chain. And I've said about the whole being able to look up the status of your suppliers, and I don't mean people that are supplying widgets that help you put something together. I mean, it could be, you know, maintenance people that look after your aircon. We've probably all heard of, you know, I think it was Target, wasn't it, in the US? They got that was a few years ago now, but still, that was a supplier. I mean, that was they were doing their HVAC, and they had some kind of online portal that let them into their business, you know, Target's business, and that was it. That's all they needed.
We've had a compromise that wasn't an insured, but through one of our vendors that was telling us last week about a casino that had a fish tank or an aquarium in a very large aquarium fitted in the casino, and the perpetrator managed to hack into their network via their aquarium pump that was connected to their network.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I'll put this in because it's really handy. I could do this from my phone.
Yeah,
it's Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm on the network. I can see everything. Look, the fish look really happy. No one's going to want to care about it. We'll just use a manufacturer default password. There's no sort of patching, and I think that's it. And we do a lot of work, and we're doing a lot of work with interconnected devices, Internet of Things, and just
IoT is the next.
And we're
big thing.
And I think we're certainly, so we offer commercial cyber insurance, personal cyber insurance, and infosec consultancy, mainly across North America, but we are growing out into Europe. And the amount of devices that we're now seeing in homes last 3 years has tripled. Like the average now is around 30 to like maybe 25 to 30, which is a staggering figure that we're seeing. Well, we expect it to double, and I think businesses are all the same in the sense that that's getting higher and higher. And is there any reference at the moment of that on the Essentials program, or do you think that's
no? But there will be. So there's going to be a Cyber Essentials for IoT. It's not fully defined yet, but IASME are working with a small group of certification bodies that are more specialized in IoT, and they're trying to put something together as a standard for it, and it's going to be along the same controls pretty much,
of course.
You know, because obviously part of your secure configuration is I've changed the default password, you know, that you know, because that is an absolute classic for that sort of thing,
which is great, because the Cyber Essentials framework, as you say, very simple pillars, but it helps mitigate even further developments, because if you're perimeter secure, then the devices that you have on that perimeter fall within that secure perimeter to a degree. And that so by doing those sort of steps, it's just simple as it sounds to the informed, but the uninformed having those implementations. And it's great to feel that the Cyber Essentials program is going to grow and evolve as digital risk does.
You know, the scheme is going to grow. It will evolve with things, you know, because, you know, who knew everybody's going to be working from home this time last year, right? You know,
but you bought shares in Zoom if you knew, right? Like
you would, wouldn't you? But those type of things, they're catered for in Cyber Essentials. You know, you bring your own device. You know, it does come into it. You still can look at that. You know, you can still make sure that your people that working from home, you know, is their router, have they changed their default password? You know, or are they using a VPN to connect straight in? All that sort of stuff. So you know, it fits all those bits that, you know, you may not have thought about or covered if you were just ISO 27001. So it's definitely a good thing to have. And you're right, it's not very well known unless you're working for one of the, you know, a big supplier necessarily, but it is going to get down that supply chain, and I think they're going to try and encourage it much more. And they'll probably, I guess, I don't know if they will do this or not, but they'll probably follow up, and they might even start emailing the supply chain themselves and saying, do you know you're working for a supplier that has Cyber Essentials? You should have Cyber Essentials, you know, and try and get a bit more momentum behind it, because it has been recognised as doing some real good, and it just needs to do more. I think to date there's probably been only over something like 30,000 certifications issued, so it's not big in the scheme of things. So
is there one thing that occurred to me, Richard, is there any crossover with the ICO? So when it comes to registering, when you're collecting or managing consumer information and the steps that you have to register with them. We have to follow the protocols when a UK company is breached. Is there
Well,
any
interestingly,
crossover?
the ICO, so they've got it's a you can download a guide for IT. I can't remember quite what it's called. It's ICO Practical Guide to IT Security, and in there, part of that they mention cyber essentials, and they say how key it is to have these controls in place. And they've even cited on their website about it was Cathay Pacific. They had £500,000 fine for releasing 9.5 million people's addresses between 2014 and 2018, something like that. And it said they failed to meet 4 out of the 5 controls within Cyber Essentials. So basically, if they'd have had Cyber Essentials, it probably wouldn't have happened at all, I imagine. And it affected something like, I don't know, over 111,000 UK citizens, had their,
it's huge.
personal data, let out in the wild, and that's how come they got the fine. But that's a classic example. So the ICO are an advocate of the whole Cyber Essentials scheme.
Good.
Because they know it works. You just got to sign up to it and do it. But it's a bit of a silent partner, if you like, I suppose. But
no, it's good. I think any regulatory body that's encouraging best practices and recommending best practices is a good thing. Certainly in the ICO, they've I can remember when the FSA was managing privacy fines or punitive fines, and then the ICO was formed, and they've had a very positive impact on raising awareness for data controls and data breaches. So, and likewise, I think it can only do well by or do good for Cyber Essentials awareness if people are recommended by the OCO to do it. So that's fantastic. Well, yeah. All right. Well, Richard, look, we're coming up to the time. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I did go into this thinking, Cyber Essentials, is it really worth it? And I think yes is the answer. You've done a fantastic job of highlighting to myself and to the listeners that I think it's definitely something that businesses should take seriously of all levels, which is a scary, 2 massive takeaways is that even if you are carrying other, in inverted commas, larger, more well-known best practices like the ICOs, that they definitely, that doesn't mean that you're Cyber Essential certified, or you would get past it. Cyber Essentials just isn't for small businesses.
It's
for all
definitely
businesses. And the next takeaway, and I love the statistic, and it's one that I'm going to speak internally about with our underwriters, is that if they do manage and hold the certification, then there is evidence and papers that suggest that the person is 80% less likely to suffer a circumstance or fall victim to a cyber peril. Then there are 2 very huge takeaways. So thank you for raising them to our attention and spreading the good word of Cyber Essentials and speaking with us today.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.